So I'm going to grab the pattern here. And where we get into the skirt section, it starts with all views. And the first thing it wants us to do is finish the outer edges of the skirt back self-facing. So you need your skirt back pieces. And if you're new to sewing and you can't remember which piece is the skirt back, just look for the pattern piece that says skirt back, which in this case it's the one that has all of the buttons, and that's the piece that you're going to be working with. So that's also the piece that we added the interfacing to. And we're going to be adding that finished edge to the side that does not have the notches. So if I'm looking at my skirt back piece, I have a side that has notches and I have a side that does not have notches. So the side that does not have notches, that has the interfacing, that is the side that I need to finish. So if you have a serger, this would be a really good time to serge these pieces. I do have a serger, however it's in New York, and that is not where I'm going to be based for the next couple of months. So I'm going to use my regular sewing machine to finish both of these edges on this piece. So let's go to the sewing machine and I'll show you how to do that now. So your sewing machine should have a few different kind of stitches that you can use for finishing an edge. I'm going to use number 10 on my machine because that's just the one that I like. And I'm going to use the standard width and length that they have. So my machine, whenever I pick a stitch, it will automatically set what it thinks is a good length and width. Yours should probably do the same. If it doesn't, you may have to play with it a little bit. But this is my interfaced edge, and it doesn't really matter which side you start on because it's not going to show anyways. And I'm just going to start stitching over that edge. And because this is a more intricate stitch, it will take a little bit longer for it to actually finish. So I'm going to be doing this for a little while. And I could make the machine go faster, but sometimes when you're working with a more intricate stitch and you force the machine to go too quickly, you may break this stitch. So I would rather not do that. I'll take my time. You can see both of my edges are done now. Oddly enough, one of these stitched really quickly and easily for me, and the other one, I tried to stitch it a little bit too fast and the thread broke twice. I should have heeded my own advice a little better. So the next thing that I'm going to do, they actually have you folding this over and sewing it next. I'm going to go ahead and mark my buttonholes now. So I looked ahead in the pattern and I know that when I finish this piece is going to fold on top of this piece. So that means my buttons will be sewn on this side and my buttonholes will be on this side. So I'm just going to go ahead and line up my pattern piece here, and I used a sewing pen to just break through the fabric here, and I have my white washable pencil, which I'm hoping is actually going to show up on here. So I'm going to do a test one really quickly. And I just want to mark where these buttonholes are going to be. Let me see if this... no, not really. Okay, let me see if I can find a blue one. The red one, this is my problem. My fabric is white and red, and the ones that I was able to find in my sewing kit are white and red. What I need is like a blue one or a yellow one or a purple one. Give me a second. Let me see what I can find. I finally found the blue one. Yay! Okay. Let's see. Oh, victory at last. That is what I need. Really distinct color. Perfect. Okay. Alright. Continuing on. Just Just going to mark each of these buttonholes. These markings really don't need to be big. They put it on the pattern piece so that you can actually draw out the entire button placement if you want. You really don't need all that. You just need a start and end point. And the reason you see me pressing the fabric down is because I have my darts sewn already, and the darts give the fabric a certain curve, and that's so that it will fit over the hip. So that makes the fabric not lie completely straight. So I'm just making sure that my fabric is straight whenever I mark it. Okay, so that takes care of that side. You can also go ahead and take this time if you want to mark your button placement on the other side. So I won't show this, but I am going to do this. I will place this on top of my pattern just like I did for the buttonholes, and now I'm just going to mark the middle of all of those buttonholes so that I know where I'm going to be sewing my button on. Alright, so make all of your markings, and then I'm going to go ahead and show you for the next part of the skirt. You're going to flip this over. This is the top of my skirt. You're just going to fold that inner facing piece over. Alright, and then you're just going to baste across the top here. Alright, that's a very small step, so I'm not going to show that at the sewing machine. We've done lots of basting, so you'll be fine. Just flip the piece over and just use your longest stitch. For me, that's 5. I'll use my longest stitch, and I'm just going to put a small stitch across here, and that's just to hold this in place for sewing later. Okay, so go ahead and mark your buttonholes. Turn both your inner facings over on both of your skirt pieces, baste them, and then join me again. And I'll show you what mine looks like after I've done that. If you followed the instructions so far, this is what you should have now. This is my interfaced piece, and it's just basted to the top on both sides of the back pieces so that they don't move around. I am going to go ahead and trim off some of these threads because they drive me nuts, as you guys well know. That looks pretty good. Okay, so just trim off a few of those, move those out of the way. Now, moving on with the directions here, like I said before, I'm doing top H with skirt D. So the next section is basically asking me to do the darts that are in the skirt front, but if you remember from earlier, we did that already. So this is my skirt front, and we already did the darts, and that's because I like to do all of my darts at the same time. I just feel like it's a more efficient way to sew more quickly. So I like to do them all at the same time. So my darts are already done. Then the next part of the instructions says to stitch the darts in the back pieces, which we have also already done. So we already have darts here. So now we get to do the fun part of actually attaching our skirt and front pieces together. So the first thing that I'm going to do, this is how the back will work, will be basically like this whenever it gets put together. I'm just going to flip that over so it's right sides up. Okay, so here's my back, here are my side seams, and then I'm going to take my skirt front piece, right sides down on top of my other right sides, and put them together. Okay, so I need to pin the right sides together of my skirt over here and also of my skirt here, because those are the sections we're going to be stitching next. So go ahead and pin together my top piece. Now I'm not going to pin all of this because I'm working with cotton, which is fantastic to work with. So a lot of this I can just take to the sewing machine and just stitch. Meaning I'll just freehand it. But I'll put in a couple of pins here at the top where the piece is a little bit more curvy and might do some moving around on me. I'll pin, there's a notch on the side, so I'll pin until I get to the notch. And I know I've said this a few times, but use as many pins as you need to. I'm only pinning to the notch, but if you're new to sewing and you feel like you need to pin all the way down, go right ahead. There's nothing wrong with that. All right. Now I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. All right. So almost there. Couple more pins. And then whenever I stitch this at the sewing machine, I'll make sure to start at the top on both sides. And that's because one piece of fabric will likely move up and down more than the other one. That's easier to tell when you get to the sewing machine, but at least at the top I want to keep my pieces together and even with the pattern as much as I can. Okay, so once you have finished once you have pinned at least that much, you can come with me to the sewing machine and we'll stitch them together. Little threads, you thought I wouldn't find you, but I did. Alright, here we go. I have my pins here so that I can put these away as I go. And I reset my machine, and that's just because I wanted to get rid of that basting stitch that I had just used. So don't forget, don't sew on a basting stitch. Okay, so 5/8 from the top in a permanent stitch, stitching, then back stitching. Just keeping it at 5/8. And then now I'm at my notch. So that was the last pin that I had. Now I'm just going to hold these together and stitch as I go. One side done. Okay, one side all finished. Now I need to do the exact same thing for the other side. Stitching, back stitch. I'm just going to hold them together. And then when I get to the bottom, back stitch a little bit. All right. So, oh, sorry machine, I'm a little too vigorous with you. Take a look at it. So take a look at it and make sure nothing looks weird in your seams, that you haven't grabbed anything oddly. Both of these look great. Okay, and once you've done that and everything looks okay, go to your ironing board and press these seams open on both sides, press them open, and then come join me again. So this is what you should have now. This is my skirt front, and then I have a seam, my skirt back, and the same thing on the other side, seam and skirt back. Okay, so now we get the very exciting part of the pattern in which we actually start to get attaching the top to the skirt. Now, since I did find my blue pen, or blue cloth marker, I should actually say, I will go ahead and mark where those buttonholes were instead of using the pins, just so I can go ahead and take those out. Ugh, much better than having to use the pins. I really love these cloth markers. Okay, there we go. That is good. Marked now. Okay, so you need to put right sides together, and you're going to start by matching up your side seams. So I'll put a side seam here. And pin that together. Here's my other side seam. Go ahead and pin that together. Then you'll match up your darts. So you have two darts in the front, those need to get matched up together too. And then I'm going to match up the ends also. Once you've matched up all of your seams and the ends and your darts, most of it will just be putting in however many pins you feel like you need to be comfortable sewing this together. I usually do sew with more pins for this part just because you really want the front of your dress or shirt or gowns or whatever you're making, you really want everything to be matched up as precisely as you can, and you want the fabric to be evenly spread as much as you can because it just looks so much nicer when you're done. Okay, so I'm only going to put in a few pins right now because this will take a little bit of time. So I don't want to film all of it, but this is what you will do. And you put in as many as you need. This is one part of sewing I would encourage you to use more pins rather than less. Okay, so you can see how I have a little bit of extra fabric here in the front. Luckily for me, my cotton has just a little bit of stretch. So I'm just going to stretch that slightly, and I will pin the front seam first, okay, and then I will, hold on, that needs a little bit more on the other side. This is one, I wish I had more hands. There we go, that's good. So I'm stretching mine just a smidge. And that's just because I want everything to be flat and lay really pretty in the front. Okay, so you get the idea. Put in as many pins as you need to be comfortable, and then we can go to the sewing machine and we will stitch this together. And make sure you pin your darts down too. You don't want those flapping around when you sew. Okay, so pin all of that and join me again. Alright, so my top is pinned to my skirt. Now I'm going to just start stitching those together at 5/8. Make sure when you start at the top that you move the bodice out of the way. You do not want to be sewing through anything you're not supposed to be. Okay? So here we are, starting right at 5/8. Also make sure when you start at the top that you don't sew on top of your flap. You ideally want to start sewing right there. And actually I'm going to put a pin in so I can see exactly where that is. There, that is where I want to start sewing. Stitch, back stitch. Keep your darts flat when you stitch through them. If you're nervous about sewing this, you can also just do a basting stitch across this entire section, and then you can take all the pins out and stitch permanently on top of that if you would prefer. Fill underneath as you go. Make sure you're not stitching through sections of fabric that you're not supposed to be. Now because of that little bit of stretch that my cotton has, you're going to see me in a section up here in a minute stitching and pulling the fabric as I go a little, and that's because there was extra fabric because of the stretch in this material. Meaning I had to fit a little bit more fabric into the section. Okay, that was it. That was the section that had a tiny bit more fabric. The rest of it fit really well. And then as you approach the end here again, pull your bodice out from underneath and make sure that you aren't sewing through that anywhere that you're not supposed to be. Okay, and as I get to the end here, I'm going to aim for that section right there, just like I did on the other side when I first started. And then back stitch a little. Okay, now before we proceed with anything else, you'll want to flip that out and look at it. And I'll zoom out so you can see what I'm looking at. So here's my bodice. It's now attached to my skirt. Now you just want to look for anything that doesn't look nice. Did you grab the fabric anywhere that you weren't supposed to? Do all of your seams match up? That one looks really good. Here you go. Here's a good example of, if you guys can see this. There is a seam here and a seam here, and you can see they match up perfectly. That is exactly what you want. You want them all to match up like that. Okay, so I don't see any strange puckers or anything that I would want or feel like I need to redo. So the next thing that I will do is go to the ironing board, and I'm going to press that seam open and upwards. So go to your ironing board, press all of this open, and then press all of it up towards the bodice, okay? Open and up. So do your pressing because that's very important, and then come back and join me again.